Hey there, and welcome back to the Blue Skies. I hope you've listened to the first two episodes of this little three-part mini-series with Air Cmde KC Kuruvilla about his action during the 1971 war, his getting shot down, ejecting, and then being captured. In the second episode, we spoke about his incarceration, how he helped his fellow POWs escape, how they were recaptured, and after that, they were transferred to a very high security facility. So we'll quickly ask the Air Commodore to recap, and then we'll get started with the last part of the story.
KC 12, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, finish report. Left land, swim west, copy.
So the last bit was we entered this huge place, which I told you was a maximum security prison, in which their strategic services group would often practice break-in or do their exercises and things like that. It was a huge maximum security prison, which the Pakistanis used to keep boasting about.
Right.
It had several mazes, one within one within, and we were right in the center. And this place was Lyallpur, Lyallpur, Lyallpur.
Right.
Okay, so that's where it was, and we stayed there for 4 months
Okay.
till we were released, and we were released from there. So life here continued as normal. Okay, and I have only one interesting incident to relate, since we were right in the center and had very little to do, and each of us were in individual cells. They were like proper jail prisons. Right? And I think during the day we were let out for a little while, and otherwise we would be kept in our cells. Okay, and I do remember that somehow in that place we got an earthen pot. I think it was part of the drinking water kit, and somehow we managed to get hold of some rations, primarily meat. And I remember late Kamath, sort of soaked that wheat and added a few things and all that and put it underground, buried it. After about 20 days, we pulled it out, and he made a contraption by lighting a fire below. And since we were all left to our own devices, nobody bothered about us. And we sort of, that fire sort of started, evaporating the liquid inside, and then we trapped the pure droplets that came out, and it turned out to be pure alcohol. This is one incident that I remember. All of us had maybe a teaspoonful that came out. It was, it really was an exercise in keeping ourselves occupied. What else do you do? You run in a cell with nothing else to do. So all these little things that devil's workshop. The devil's workshop, as it were. And it was more of a laugh and fun than anything serious that came out. Of course, we were careful to make sure that nobody else came to know, but whatever that piping and tubing and all that we got, it was all makeshift, whatever we found here and there. And that was the one incident. So life continued there normal. On Sundays, it is interesting for me to mention here, on Sundays I was allowed to interact with our Indian Army And what primarily the interaction was that they held a church service. There were a lot of Northeast Indian Manipuris and Nagas who were taken prisoner of war. And there was a Captain Dastur there and a major. I'm forgetting the major's name, but he was from Rajput, from Rajasthan. And I don't know whether it was a Rajput, part of a Rajput regiment, in which he and part of his men got captured, right? So in that church service, it was very interesting because these men from the Northeast would sing in Manipuri, and it was so, what should I say? It was so calming and peaceful to the mind. And yeah, one odd Sunday, or once or twice, I think, I had given a little talk, which primarily started with the Air Force, how it functions and how we got captured, and, a little bit of the prisoners of war, my colleagues. They sort of walked in and got captured. But we all came from the air, under circumstances and tough capture, tough ejections and all the rest of it. So injuries and all that. So they found it very interesting, and it created a bonding between us. And I think occasionally, all 10 of us would meet with the senior most army chap. He was a major. And the next fellow was Captain Dastur, as I remember. And, and anytime they did a langar and cooked, we would be invited on special occasions. And we would, have food and taste what they made. And yeah, it was interesting. They were allowed to run their own langar, I think, I must mention here, the camp commandant of the maximum security prison where our army was interned was an excellent person. He had first-hand information on what was happening in India with the Pakistani prisoners of war held here. And he would often say that, I want your prisoners, all of you, to be happy here. You are what you are as prisoners of war. It's our business to make sure that you are safe, and we will ensure that you don't get out, as the Air Force officers did. And we know that our prisoners of war are being treated very well. So your army, this is what he told us, your army officers and men are being treated well. You will be meeting with them, and they run their own langar, cook their own food, and their officers look after them, and they interact with each other. And we meet any needs that they have. And that was very happy. This was the little chat we had, or a briefing we had from the camp commandant a few days after we were interned there and put into our prison. So they were kept in a separate area, which was not as security conscious. I think they were resigned. Too many. There were 610 of them.
That's what I was going to ask you. How many of them were there?
They were 600 and we were 10, making it 610. I'm 600.
Okay.
So I'm forgetting exactly. But our total strength was 610 there. Right? So eventually. Yeah. So.
And by the time, this was which years? How long had it been since the war?
This was in 1972, as I told you, somewhere in June or July. When was it?
Okay.
Yeah, July 3rd was, I told you, the incident of the newspaper, and then followed by the escape, which took place about 3 weeks later. Somewhere around 14th July was the escape, correct? And by the time we moved, it was 16th or 17th of July. Okay?
Right.
So we've been in that camp from 17th July till 3rd of December, 2nd or 3rd of December, when we were made to cross the border and released. Okay.
Were the other officers also allowed to attend any sort of Hindu service?
Oh yeah, they had. Yes, of course. You see, the thing about the army, I must bring it out here. When I say church services on a Sunday, everything happened. There were bhajans, and those who wanted to go there went there. I don't remember who they were, who went to think, but everything. There were bhajans and there were
Okay.
Christian songs hymns that were sung in Manipuri, and all that I remember very much.
And what sort of food were you getting? What is the quality, quantity?
Yeah, whatever I think the Pakistani soldiers and all ate, we got the same thing. There was no difference.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think occasionally whatever our chaps cooked, we got that. So I don't remember which was which at this stage, but we ate
Okay.
normal food. And I think to my mind, whatever our chaps were cooking were also being given to us. It was
And
to start.
were you getting meat occasionally, or was it
Yeah,
only
yeah. Getting
vegetarian?
meat occasionally, and whatever was given to our soldiers, we got a part of that.
Okay. So how did you find out about your on impending release, and what was that
Yeah, so I'm
like?
coming to that. So life carried on till around the end of November. Nearing the end of November, the camp commandant, the colonel, came to Wing Commander Bunny Coelho and said, "We want your help to make a helipad." So, we were not, it was a very normal question. And Bunny Coelho, and Jaffa talked about it because we were, as I told you, we were all in our individual cells, right?
Right.
So obviously this must have been, it was not a general meeting where I was that I can remember, not at all. Like, say, the POW camp in Rawalpindi, where we were all
Right.
together in one room and everything was clear, crystal clear in my head. Here it was not so. Anyway, the one fine day, somewhere around, latter part of November, Wing Commander Bunny Coelho called me, and I think Jaffa was there also. They said, "Kuru, the colonel has requested that we build them a helipad. Can you sort of look into it?" I said, "Yeah, most certainly," because I was the junior most, and I was being detailed, so there's no question about it. So I was told that, that you have to go to the Indian Army side. They will give you some men there and maybe one officer, Indian officer as well, and there'll be Pakistani guards who will be guarding all of you, and you are to go to some other enclosure where they'll take you, and you kindly build a helipad there. And since all of us have helicopter squadrons in our bases, it was nothing new. So I went there and I was given a detail, as they called it, with with all the implements, and there were Pakistani guards. So we went to this yet another enclosure, which is wide open, and there, what I did initially was we started clearing out an area, okay, just roughly, and then I requested for a pole, and they gave me that pole. We inserted that pole into the ground, and we tied a couple of loose tassels of ribbons, like ribbons. Okay, basically, from what I remember, they brought some cloth, which was cut into strips, and they didn't give it to us. They tied it on the pole and erected the pole. Okay, and every day in the morning, I would come and check roughly where the wind is blowing, which way the wind is blowing, okay, for an orientation, all right? And knowing that the helicopter would be ideally nice for it to land into wind, right? So I just had a rough idea of which side was the wind blowing and which is north and which is south and, east and west. We marked that on the ground, okay? And then we marked the wind direction. And then I requested them to get a windsock. And I asked, what time of day do you think you will use the helipad? They didn't have an answer. They said, "Sorry, we just don't know. It's not that we don't want to tell you, we don't know. We know that a helicopter will come and land here, and that's all we know." So that was it. So after about 4 or 5 days, they got this permanent thick pole, and they brought a sort of almost like a windsock. I asked for a windsock, and they obviously must have relayed that to their Air Force thing, and they didn't get anything. They said, you don't worry about that, just put up something like a sock, which they brought, and that was it. The wind direction was being indicated by these tassels and that little piece of a broad band of cloth. It was not like a socks or wind sock, SOC, right, with a hole. No, it was just something fluttering in the wind,
Right.
and that was good, large enough to indicate to a pilot. And we cleared the area and demarcated it and made it of a decent size for a helicopter. And that's it. We forgot about it. And the Pakistan Army guys maintained it. Or once in a way, they took our chaps just to clear it up again. Then on 2nd or 3rd of December, we were suddenly in the morning, we were all dressed up. And we were marched out of our cells, marched into the compound. We all, got together as a group with our senior most in the lead. And then we were marched back to the area where we had entered, because faint recollection of that gate we all had. And then a sort of an iron door on the left of the main gate opened, and we walked in. And we walked into a compound. In that compound, there were about 14, 15 chairs that were placed there. And then we found our Jawans were seated already there. They were already seated. And we knew that something is about to happen as a briefing or something. So we were all made to sit down.
Right.
And, I was also in the front row. I remember that. And after a little while, we heard this, the colonel came, of course, and said, please sit down and there will be a briefing. So we were expecting a briefing, and we didn't know who's going to brief us. We thought it's the colonel who's going to brief us. In a little while, we heard the helicopter, and it came and landed. About 5 minutes after the helicopter landed, this iron door opened, and we all got a shock. And there was this gentleman who walked in. There was a chair right in front of us, which had been placed there already. And this gentleman walked in a pinstripe suit. And guess who it was? It was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection, for midway, and you will select it.
Oh, wow.
And just 6 to 8 feet away from us was this chair. He came, he didn't sit down. He just stood with his hands on the back of the chair, and he spoke to us, and it was very brief, in and out. He said, good morning, gentlemen. I want you all to go home. Please tell your country that we want peace with your country, and we would like you to go home, and please tell your country to send back our prisoners of war.
Wow.
And with that, that's all I remember. With that, it was such a shock. With that, he just turned around and he left. As quickly as he came, he left.
Wow. And he spoke in English?
Yes, he spoke in English.
So our Jawans might not have understood him then.
You think Bhutta was concerned about all that? Come on. You think I think you would have read enough to know about Bhutta. He just walked in, breezed in, spoke the Queen's English in English, and he walked out. That's all I remember.
I'm just wondering whether, the whole group broke out in cheers or something.
No, there was a lot of excitement, because as soon as he left, we all jumped up, and there was, naturally, the Jawans would have understood. They're not ignorant.
Right.
They would definitely have understood in their platoons and in their regiments and all. People do speak English, and I'm sure in any case, the army major, he got up immediately and he started his own briefing.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I don't know what he told them, because we were all just too excited, and Air Force got together and said, okay. And, I remember Jaffa's all excitement. He was also a very learned sort of a person. He said, okay, gentlemen, this is it. We are going back home, and let's now think of going home. And now a few things, important things happened, Guns. This news had been given to the Pakistan press.
Mm-hmm.
Almost immediately, there was a reaction from the students of Lahore who said, who went on sort of like a strike and said, these prisoners are not going to go back till we get ours back.
Wow.
So that how should I put it? That bundled into a reaction which came all the way to Layalpur, and almost immediately there were people who had sort of cleared out that place. Even though what you call this, we expected what should I say? Pakistan was not, as you know, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was the prime minister, so there was no army that could do anything immediately. So this strike outside of our maximum security prison, this is all hearsay from what we heard from the Pakistanis. The colonel himself said, we were supposed to go back tomorrow. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen because there is a reaction, and there are students and people obstructing us from taking you out. So we have to keep this quiet. And they just let us alone and didn't tell us anything for 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And on the third day, somewhere in the night, we were all packed into buses, into a bus rather, the Air Force, and our army, of course, was also packed into buses. I don't remember, when they crossed or anything like that. All I remember is, and we did this journey, and we reached Wagah somewhere around the evening time. We reached our border, Wagah border.
Mm-hmm.
There, one by one, we were made to sign some documents and all, and we were, we were led across, and we were started crossing one by one to the Indian side, and starting with the senior most.
Right.
After 50 years. But I have to tell you a very, very interesting story about me. I was the last to cross over. And I crossed the Pakistan side. And as I was crossing the Pakistan side, there was this guy standing there whom I just would never have paid attention to because of the excitement of getting onto the other side.
Yeah.
And now it is evening, and it is now the time when they do their drill of closing that gate.
Right.
So obviously our army had crossed earlier, and the whole drill had taken time. Okay. And now I'm the last guy, the junior most last Air Force guy.
Right.
And with me, the gates were going to close. Now, as I passed this guy, something, sort of hit my mind. I don't know. I crossed him, turned around, and he was holding something, and it was dangling from his right hand. Oh, I just turned around, ran to it, and I just rubbed it. It was almost like blackish green. I rubbed it, and I found it was solid gold. It was my mother's chain, which they had taken.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Then, the way he was holding it, he was holding the cross, right?
My
so I
goodness.
didn't see the cross dangling.
Right.
So I rubbed it and I said, this is my chain. He said, Saab, hum isikliye abhi ko dhoond rahe the, that something words to that effect.
My
Then
goodness.
he said, oh, you have to sign for it.
Wow.
So I said, oh my God, I have to go back. And meanwhile, everybody had left. So I went back. I signed for it. They gave me the cross. As I ran across, the bugles had started playing and the gates were closing. On both sides. It's hair raising. Right? Even now my hair is standing as I recall the story.
Wow.
So on our side now, guns, on our side, what happened? Because all this took time and the drill of closing the gates is a very pakka thing on both sides. They have a mutual understanding.
Right.
As I crossed, the bugle went off, and I found that I was alone. The rest of the crowd had actually been received by the Chief Minister of Punjab.
Wow.
He was there to receive our prisoners of war. Army had gone first, Air Force came last, and I was the last. And since mine had taken time, nobody was waiting for me. They left a vehicle, and one army person was left behind, along with a civilian.
My goodness.
Yes. So there was a jeep. I was put into that jeep, and then we drove, and eventually I caught up. I caught up with the crowd. By then, the chief minister had already started his speech, and it was an open Maidan where everybody was seated, and my God, it was chaos there, meaning, the hero cycles, Munjal, that's right. Mr.
Yeah.
Munjal had come, he had distributed gifts to everybody. Mine was, also there, given to somebody. And all I recall was that this whole thing was nearing completion, and I just sat myself down somewhere. And then eventually I linked up with all the Air Force people. The chief minister spoke, he welcomed everybody back, and there was chaos with all the civilians, coming in and saying, hello, well done, this thing, that thing, but all the thing. I was just too overwhelmed to remember very much. All that I remember was that immediately after that, we were all, taken somewhere. We stayed one night in Ludhiana, and next day, an aircraft flew us out of Halwara or somewhere. I don't remember where exactly. And we landed in Delhi in the
Where
morning.
was Mrs. Kuruvilla during this time?
She was still in Chennai.
Okay.
Families were not allowed guns. That's we'll continue with the podcast. So we landed in Delhi where the chief was there, and, he received us, and there was a big thing. The thing now here, it was a little sad for me in the sense that my CO was there. Alan DeCosta was there. He shook my hand, he hugged me, and, and then he had to leave. So we were kind of lost. I was really lost. I was really lost. And my brother-in-law was allowed to come, but it was from a distance. That is Grace's brother, my wife's brother. From a distance, I could say hello to him. He said, welcome. I hardly knew him because I was just married 4 months.
Right.
So, and he was my father's age. Grace my wife was 24 years junior to him in age.
Wow. Oh, boy.
So he was like a father to her and a father to me.
Right.
So we just said hello, and then we were whisked off. We were taken away. Now this is the story, or this is the part that I told you. So from there, we were taken to CV mess or somewhere where we stayed. Next morning, I reported to Air Headquarters, where an officer from the DN's office put me in a room, gave me a pen and lots of white sheets of paper. And there was just one sentence which I had to answer. That was the thing. He said, on so-and-so date, you signed for BA 854 or whatever that aircraft was.
Right.
And you went on this mission, and you did not return. And you returned on 3rd December 1972, right? So, and you ejected on 6th December 1971. So please tell us what all happened.
Right.
So, now it was such a, I tell you, my heart was in my mouth. I was alone in that room. I had no postmates. As I told you, I was the youngest and the first on steroids. So there was nobody, peer group whom I had as a friend who could come and say hello to me at that airport, Palam Airport, where we landed. So that was a little sad for me. And my wife was not there. Families were not allowed. And my brother-in-law just said hello, and he was off. thing. So my heart was really in my mouth. I didn't know what to write, except that I had to recollect everything and put it down in paper.
Right.
What was really worrying me was that, see, Mullah Feroz and Vikram Peti had already come back in 3 months. Now, what they would have written and what they said, what they didn't say, we don't know. So what went through my mind was, listen, I'm going to just write from the moment I signed that Form 700 till I came back, whatever happened in my debrief, in my interrogation, in the life in the campus, and what I saw life through my eyes and prism of my eyes. I just wrote all that and I wanted to get out. It took 2 days.
Right.
And I just wanted to leave that place, And there was nobody who came to my room except the officer who was, whatever they call him. I don't remember. He was the guy who asked me questions, and you can call him an IO or something, whatever.
Right.
An interrogation officer or an interacting officer or whatever. And I don't remember his name. I don't recall anything about him because I just, was so excited and overwhelmed. And I was disappointed. I didn't know this is part of the... And that is what I loved about Bandal Tyagi. He piped up quickly on Yahoo and said, listen, what Kuru is saying is right. Because I have been in D-Int and I know that this is how there is a debrief and an interrogation at air headquarters of all the POWs who come back. It is a part of the drill, part of the process. Otherwise, I was, I felt like, I was being haunted.
Yeah, right.
So after finishing that debrief, I know that I was told, to go back to my unit. So I went to...
Did they ask you any questions about any clarification about what you'd written?
Nothing.
They just took whatever you'd written.
Yes, whatever I written was taken. No questions were asked, in fact. Because I think the urgency was to get us out. We were coming back after 1 year.
Right.
And there were a lot of frustration. And I was allowed, I must mention it here. I think of the whole lot of us, I was the only person who was reposted to my original unit. This is what I remember.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went back to 222 Squadron after 2 days. And I remember I went back in series. I had no uniform, no nothing. And I remember reporting to the squadron in whatever clothes I had, civilian clothes that my brother-in-law brought and gave me.
Wow.
And so I wore that, went to the squadron where I was really received so well by the CO, the flight commanders, all my squadron pilots, and of course the men. The men were really thrilled because those who were not posted out and remained with the squadron, they gave me a very warm welcome, and they didn't want any officers around. They only wanted me, and they wanted me to sit down and tell them, how did I spend 1 year? Exactly the same thing like air headquarters, sir. You on that day you took the aircraft, sir, then you never came back. Please tell us. Now you've come back. But this was, of course, a much, it was almost like Alice in Wonderland story. Yeah, that's right. I just told them about all the action and what all I faced, and all the difficulties I went through, and the injuries, and and the life in solitary confinement, life in jail, life with Pakistanis per se, and the return back home, and everything. I opened my heart out to them. In those days, the guns, the men were like your buddies. Your life depended on them, And, I have to mention also this, many years later, by then, he was, I think, a junior warrant officer, or he was, I don't remember, a sergeant. He got in touch with me. He said, sir, I am the fellow who packed your parachute.
Wow.
And I can't forget that, because if he had done a bad job, I wouldn't have been alive today to tell you this story. So it was, and it never, the importance of what he of his call and what he told me never struck me till I was actually talking to him. And we take this job of the SEW, safety equipment worker. We take it so lightly, and we never see these guys.
Yeah.
These are like our COVID warriors today, whom we don't see.
Visual, show, Ford, Repartriation. Just need 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection, for Repartriation, and field selected.
After 2 or 3 days in the squadron, we had orders to go on leave. It was sort of an enforced leave for a month and more if we needed. So I remember going only for a month, and I sort of reunited with Grace in Delhi, because once my leave was sanctioned, she was allowed to come, and she came to Delhi. And in Delhi, she had a sister. So we stayed there with them for 2-3 days, where I recouped, and K. George was a great Malayali who drank good whiskey. 2-3 days with them, and then we flew to Chennai. My parents were in Chennai, and so it was a nice family reunion of both sides. Just as we got married, both sides got together. Now it was another reunion a year and a half later.
How was it to meet your parents, and how was their reaction
Oh my
to
God,
see you again?
my mother was so happy when I handed over that chain to her. I said, "Thank you very much." Yeah, I don't want it. A very heavy 8-tola chain, and with a cross. And I said, "Please take it back. It saved my life. It served its purpose. I'll make and get one of my own."
And how about getting back to flying status? How long did that take? And what did it feel like getting back into a cockpit after so long
It
and after that
was, it
experience?
was, I was really excited. I wanted, I owed it to Grace to spend 1 month with her,
Yeah.
because we had no honeymoon, And so spending 1 month with her outside of the Air Force environment, and, just with family, both sides, was a very nice thing. I didn't want to rush it. Much as I was very eager to get back, I used to keep writing to the squadron, what's the serviceability state, how is flying, all the ridiculous questions that a pilot officer really asks. But now I was a senior flying officer, and I'm sure I was in a short while due for a rank, and to flight lieutenant, but I was still a flying officer. Anyway, after 1 month was over, I went back to the squadron. I started flying immediately. I did one dual check, got back into the grind. Life went on very normally. And 3 months later, I'd barely done enough flying. I was posted to FIS, nominated to Flying Instructor School, to do the course to become an instructor. Right? So in between that, I had taken some leave, and I went to Chennai, and because FIS also is in Chennai in any case.
Yeah.
So I probably cleared from the squadron, and I went on leave before I joined FIS. And I think it was around this time that the papers announced the Veer Chakra. And then somewhere around March or April was the announcement. And March, it was, I think in March that it was announced. And very quickly, I had to report to Delhi. I reported there, got a Veer Chakra, came back, and went to FIS, Flying Instructor School.
Who is the president who awarded you that?
V.V. Giri.
V.V. Giri, okay.
Prime Minister was Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who is still, at the head of our...
Right, sure. And, before I let you go, I just have to ask about the upcoming movie, and, how did that discussion start off, and what's the status of that? Because
yeah, you see,
we want to make sure the audience is all primed and ready to see it when it comes out.
Yeah, so this was a complete bolt out of the blue. I think the year was 2017. And I got a call from Bombay. And this guy came on the line and he said, I'm Vivek Bora from the Bora brothers. And I want to speak to you for a few minutes. I said, what about? So he said, sir, we've been researching you for 2 years. So that really, it shook me up a bit. And I said, what about? He said, sir, don't get alarmed. He said, sir, we're planning to make a movie on you. And there's a lot that we have found on the internet and from various people that you have ejected 3 times, you were a prisoner of war, you got a Veer Chakra, all that. So there's a movie that is planned about you, and we are planning to release it on 26th January 2020, and it's going to be called Vayu Sena. They said the director is a person called Vivek Gutte, and he's a person who's made Accidental Prime Minister and 1 or 2 other popular movies. So I said, listen, I can't give you a consent just like that, because there's a book that my children are planning to write, and so I don't think that will worry us a lot, but we'll make an agreement and we'll come to Bangalore. So let us allow us to come to Bangalore. So they came to Bangalore. And in Bangalore, they talked about it, and that's where they elaborated on who the director is and what they're going to do and all the rest of it. And they said the director has a view of just making it a movie where they're going to focus on the contradiction or what you may have gone through and the decision-making process, where after your 3rd ejection, the executive were hesitant to let you fly. Aerospace and medical side definitely did not want you to fly fighters. This is what we have learned. I said, how did you learn this? They said, this is what we have come to know of cases of ejections, that they don't allow people to fly after the 3rd ejection. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think there is one other officer who has flown after 3rd ejection. He said, maybe, sir, but you have flown frontline fighters, and you have gone back to not only flying frontline fighters, but you also commanded a squadron and formed the first, you re-equipped number 9 squadron, and you made it into a MiG-27 ML squadron, which was the first squadron of MiG-27 firing laser-guided weapons and electro-optical weapons, and assembled by HAL. So they seem to have a lot of
research.
Yeah, they had done a lot of definite research, and they had pulled out excerpts from the internet on the Bird Strike movie, which was already made on me by Indian News Review, and then bits of information like that they had. And he said, would you consent to this? I said, yes, you give me the agreement, I'll run it through a lawyer. So they came back with a renewed agreement that was fine. I ran it through a lawyer, and he said, no, this is all right, you can go ahead. So that's it. I haven't heard anything much, but once in a way they keep calling and saying, sir, it's very much alive, but the pandemic is here and Bombay is in bad shape. A lot of the team has got COVID, and there's no way we can proceed at all. And I did give it a thought, and I realized that if they're going to dramatize it to make money out of it, and if it's not really a story of my life or what this director Gutte had. Gutte's thoughts are very, very good. He's a very sharp young director, and he said, I'm not going to touch on your POW tenure or anything like that. It will be maybe just a brief mention. But what I intend to bring out is the conflict that the service would have gone through, and you in it, where the doctors are saying 4th ejection will kill this fellow or will paralyze him permanently. We don't advise sending him back to fighters. And the executive being silent and not making up its mind, waiting for KC Kuruvilla. And I put up my application saying, I do not want to go to any other stream. I am fit. You prove me that I am unfit for fighters.
Yeah,
For
right.
which they, yeah, that's right. And I went through tremendous amount of checks. I was sent back to IAM after this particular interview with the CNC, Western Air Command. I was sent back to IAM. They put me in a gondola and they, rotated me at high G, 9G. Then I was put into a vibrator which vibrated my body in 3 different dimensions.
Wow.
At the same time, after 10 minutes, they drew intravenous blood and they did some checks. There were no metabolic changes. So I sat another 10 minutes because I was desperate to get back in the cockpit. And I wanted the doctor on my side. No metabolic changes in my blood. And now I was really, really happy and I was in top mood because after that, there was no way the commandant could put me down.
Right.
They did everything else. All the check, blood tests, gondola was done, the vibrator was done, and that was it. And so that's where the movie is at, and that's what Vijay Gote has in mind.
Really enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank you for taking so much time and for recounting your experiences in so much detail. It's just been wonderful. Sir.
You're most welcome.
Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection for evacuate and vehicle selected.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that 3-part miniseries with Air Cmde Kuruvilla. There are a couple of points that maybe didn't come through clearly. I just wanted to highlight them. One is that, he hit that machine gun across the canal at Dera Baba Nanak, and after that, his squadron mounted several sorties, partly to protect him, but also to hit some of the Pakistani army on that side. And that really enabled that brigade to almost reach Lahore. So it really had a critical part to play in the campaign in 1971. And in fact, the army officer, Major Chand, who later became a colonel, who reached out to Air Cmde Kuruvilla, had mentioned to his brigade commander that I hope the Air Force gives him something, because if they don't, then we should nominate him for some sort of a gallantry award. So that was, the level of cooperation and appreciation between the services that was so critical to our successes during that war. Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.